It was snowing hard in Winterfell that morning. The cold winds rushed through the courtyards as Jon Snow stood quietly near the stables, holding his sword, Longclaw, which he hadn't yet earned in this version of events. His mind was heavy with decisions, but one thought kept playing in his heart. He didn't belong here. He was a bastard, the unwanted child, always reminded of what he wasn't. Robb would one day rule Winterfell. Bran and Rickon had their future. Even Arya had a fire in her that gave her direction. But Jon, all he had was a name he didn't even fully understand. He had made up his mind to join the Night's Watch. Uncle Benjen had painted it like an honorable life, protecting the realm, wearing black, standing at the edge of the world. It sounded like something he could finally call his own. But what Jon didn't know was that something had changed. Lord Eddard Stark had received a raven the night before, a secret letter not meant for anyone else's eyes. The words inside were simple, but shook him. They reminded him of a promise he had made to his sister, Liliana, as she lay dying. He had kept her secret safe for 16 years. Jon was not Ned's son. He was the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Liliana Stark. Not a Snow, not a bastard, a prince. And now Jon wanted to throw his life away at the wall. Ned couldn't allow it. He found Jon near the stables, his horse already saddled. Ned walked slowly, his face calm but serious. Jon turned and stood straight, thinking his father had come to say goodbye. "You're leaving without saying farewell?" Ned asked, his voice deep and cold as the wind. "I thought it would be easier this way. I didn't want to make a scene." Ned stared at him, his eyes piercing but not unkind. "You think the wall is your only path because of your name, because of who you believe you are. But Jon, there's much you do not know." Jon frowned. "What could I possibly not know, father? I'm a bastard. I have no future here." "You are not a bastard," Ned said quietly, the words falling like stones. Jon blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" Ned paused. He looked around to make sure no one was near, then motioned Jon to walk with him into the Godswood. As they walked, the snow kept falling, but neither of them spoke until they were alone among the old trees. "I've protected you all your life," Ned began, "not just from the whispers of court or the cold shoulders of nobles, but from the truth. A truth that could have gotten you killed." Jon's heart raced. "Father, what truth?" Ned turned to face him. "You are not my son, Jon. You are my sister, Liliana's son. She gave birth to you in the Tower of Joy and made me promise to keep you safe." Jon stared, his mouth slightly open. "No, that's not possible. She died." "Yes, she died giving birth to you. Your real father was Rhaegar Targaryen." Jon stepped back. His whole world started spinning. "A Targaryen?" Ned nodded, his face full of pain. "If Robert Baratheon knew who you were, he would have killed you as a child. That's why I lied. That's why I let the world believe you were my shame. I dishonored myself to protect you." Jon's voice was shaking. "So, I'm not a Snow. I'm not a Stark either. Then who am I?" "You are both," Ned said. "You have the blood of the dragon and the wolf. You are a prince, Jon. You have a destiny far beyond the wall." Jon couldn't believe what he was hearing. All his life he had wanted to be someone, to matter. And now, in a single moment, his life had changed forever. "I was going to throw everything away," Jon whispered. "Join the Night's Watch, never marry, never have children, never know who I truly was." "That's why I had to stop you," Ned said. "You still have a choice. And if you go to the wall now, your true identity may never be revealed. The world may need you, Jon, but not as a brother of the Night's Watch." For a long moment, Jon said nothing. His hands were cold, his mind full of noise.
But slowly he nodded. "All right, I won't go." And just like that, fate was rewritten. The next few days in Winterfell passed in silence, but not peace. Jon stayed mostly in his chambers or wandered the empty halls, thinking about what his father, no, his uncle, had told him. The name Targaryen felt foreign in his mouth. He couldn't even say it out loud without feeling like he was speaking someone else's name. He had spent his whole life wearing the shame of being a bastard, only to learn he had royal blood flowing in his veins. But with that blood came danger. He understood why Ned had hidden the truth. Robert Baratheon had raged against the Targaryens for years. If Jon's true identity ever reached King's Landing, there would be no second chances, no mercy. He would be hunted like a traitor, killed before he ever learned what kind of man he truly was. Still, he didn't feel like a prince. He still felt like Jon Snow. Robb noticed the change first. His brother was no longer talking about the Night's Watch or his dreams of honor. He was distant in a way that made Robb feel like something important had shifted between them. One afternoon, Robb cornered him in the courtyard while the younger Stark brothers practiced archery. "You never told me why you changed your mind. One day you were set on going north, the next you're hiding in shadows." Jon looked at him, unsure how much to say. "I just realized I was running from something, not running toward anything." "That doesn't sound like you. You always wanted to be more than what people called you, a bastard." Jon's jaw tightened. "Maybe I don't have to accept that label anymore." "What are you talking about?" Before Jon could answer, their father approached. Lord Stark had been watching from a distance, and he could see the question forming in Robb's eyes. He placed a hand on Jon's shoulder. "Walk with me, Jon." They walked side by side, through the halls, back into the Godswood, where truth seemed to live. The silence between them felt heavier than before. Finally, Jon broke it. "I can't keep lying to him. Robb's my brother in every way that matters." "He is," Ned agreed. "But sometimes the truth is more dangerous than any lie." Jon kicked at the snow under his boots. "What do I do now? Just sit here in Winterfell while the rest of the world moves forward? Bran is learning to climb. Arya is becoming fierce. Sansa dreams of marrying a prince. Even Rickon, he's got more future than I do." Ned looked at him, his face weathered from years of battle and burden. "You're not ready yet, Jon. The truth of your birth gives you a future most men would kill for, but only if you survive long enough to claim it." Jon turned to the heart tree, its red leaves rustling softly in the wind. "You speak like there's more coming." "There always is," Ned said quietly. "Robert is marching to Winterfell soon. He wants me to be Hand of the King. If I leave, I can't take you with me." "Why not?" Jon asked, eyes sharp. "If I'm truly your sister's son—" "Exactly why," Ned cut in. "In King's Landing, secrets don't stay secret, and your name could cost you your head. If you stay here, you're safe." "Safe? Is that what I'm supposed to be now? A hidden thing? A secret buried under snow?" Ned's voice was low but firm. "You are what keeps a promise alive, Jon. I gave your mother my word, and I will not break it now." That night, Jon stood alone on the battlements, looking north toward the wall. He had once believed it was the only place he belonged. Now it was just a cold prison he had almost chosen. Behind him, footsteps echoed. Catelyn. Jon turned slowly, already feeling the chill in the air between them. She had never hidden her dislike for him, always treating him as if he were a curse laid upon her home. "I don't know what you said to Ned," she began, her voice sharp, "but if you think you've earned a place here, you're wrong." Jon stayed silent. "You've always been a shadow," she said, stepping closer, "and shadows don't belong in the light." He met her eyes. "I never asked to be here. I never asked for any of this." "But you are here," she hissed, "and now you're staying. I don't know why, but I can feel it. Something has changed." "I maybe has," he said. She stared at him a moment longer, then turned and left without another word. John looked out to the snow-covered woods, his heart heavy. He wasn't going to the wall. He wasn't leaving Winterfell. And for the first time in his life, he had no idea what came next.
Winterfell woke early on the morning King Robert arrived. The sound of drums echoed through the valley as horses' hooves thundered across the snow-covered roads. The king's banners, Baratheon's black stag and Lannister's golden lion, fluttered high above the long column of riders and carriages. Peasants lined the roads just outside the gates. Servants rushed in every direction. The kitchens boiled with the smell of roast meats, baked pies, and wine being prepared for the feast. Jon Snow stood quietly by one of the towers, watching from a shadowed archway. He wasn't part of the welcome party. He wasn't asked to stand beside his siblings. He didn't wear fine clothes or carry a lord's name. But he watched, eyes locked on the man who had hunted the Targaryens to near extinction, King Robert Baratheon. The king was larger than life, broad, loud, and laughing as he dismounted his horse with the help of 2 squires. He embraced Ned like a brother, gripping him hard and calling him "Stark, you old ice block." Then he kissed Catelyn's hand, nodded to the children, and demanded to see the crypts. Jon's breath caught when he heard that. The crypts, where Lyanna rested. As the royal party was led into the great hall, Jon turned and walked quickly through the inner courtyard, slipping down a stone stairwell that led deep beneath the castle. He passed cold stone walls lit by flickering torches. His footsteps echoed in the silence. When he finally reached the statue of Lyanna Stark, he stopped and stared. She looked peaceful in stone, not like someone who had died in blood and pain. Jon didn't know her. He had no memories, just whispers, stories, his supposed mother, and now, his real one. He was still standing there when someone entered behind him. Jon turned sharply, hand moving toward the dagger on his hip, but it was only Maester Luwin. "You should be careful where you walk these days," the old man said gently. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," Jon replied. "You never do," Luwin said with a soft smile. "But you always seem to find it." Jon looked back at the statue. "She was my mother." Luwin paused, then nodded. "So Lord Stark has told you?" Jon looked at him, confused. "You knew?" "Not all of it, but I always suspected there was more to your birth than he admitted." Jon lowered his voice. "Why would he keep it secret this long?" "Because the world is cruel to those it fears. You carry a name that once ruled the 7 kingdoms, and that name was hunted near to death. Lord Stark may be a man of honor, but for you, he chose silence over pride." Jon's heart ached with questions, but he nodded. When he returned to the upper halls, Winterfell had become something else. It wasn't home anymore. It was a stage, and every room had actors now. Men in gold cloaks, Lannister guards with sharp smiles, ladies in silk whispering behind their hands. He caught sight of Queen Cersei once, standing near the window, her gaze cold as snow. Beside her was Prince Joffrey, face twisted in boredom, looking around as if everything in the north stank. Jon avoided them. That evening, at the feast, he was not allowed a seat at the high table. Instead, he sat at the far end of the hall, away from the nobles, eating in silence. From where he sat, he could see Sansa laughing too loudly at Joffrey's dull jokes, Arya playing with her food, and Bran staring in awe at the knights in armor. Robb looked older somehow, even though only days had passed. He sat straight, his eyes watching everything. Then he saw him, Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer, Tall, golden, proud. He moved like a lion among sheep, and as he passed near Jon's seat, he paused just a moment too long. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, a flicker. Not recognition, but suspicion. Jon looked away first. Later that night, after most had gone to sleep, Ned came to Jon's room. Robert wants me to go south with him, to be his hand. Jon nodded. You'll go? I have no choice. Jon hesitated. Will you tell him? About me? Ned shook his head. Not yet. He wouldn't understand. And if Cersei found out... Jon frowned. The Queen. She's dangerous, isn't she? Ned nodded. She's worse than dangerous. She's clever. There was a pause. Then Ned added, If anything happens to me in King's Landing, you must be careful, Jon. You must protect yourself and never tell anyone who you really are. Not even Robb? Jon asked, voice low. Not even him. Not yet. Jon looked down at his hands. They were shaking. Why does it feel like everything is changing? Ned placed a hand on his shoulder. Because it is. Ned Stark left Winterfell before the sun rose, riding south with King Robert and his royal court. The sound of hooves fading into the trees felt like the heartbeat of Winterfell had been ripped away. Jon stood at the gate long after they were gone, feeling more alone than ever, even though he hadn't said goodbye in public. Their last words had been spoken in the privacy of Jon's room, quiet and serious. He still remembered the look in Ned's eyes, like he was carrying the weight of the whole realm on his back. Winterfell became quieter after that. The royal guests were gone, the halls less crowded. The Lannisters had returned to the capital, except for one, Tyrion, the dwarf, who had chosen to delay his travel and visit the wall. Jon found himself watching the imp from a distance, unsure of what to make of him. Tyrion was sharp with his words, always drinking, always mocking, but there was a strange sadness in his eyes that Jon recognized. They were alike in that way, both unwanted, both out of place. It was on the third night after Robert's departure that Tyrion cornered Jon in the library, where the young man had been avoiding everyone. So, the bastard who decided not to become a crow. Jon tensed, unsure if it was insult or observation. What do you want? Tyrion smiled. Only a conversation. I have a long journey ahead. Might as well waste the night talking to someone who understands being looked at sideways. I see that. I see you, in the way you walk. Jon sighed. You don't know anything about me. Maybe, Tyrion said, settling into a chair without asking. But I know a man who's hiding something when I see one. Jon looked away, gripping the edge of the table. Why do you care? I don't, Tyrion said casually, but I enjoy secrets, and there's something about you that smells of dragons. Jon froze. Tyrion watched him closely. I've read enough books to know a lie when I see one. You don't walk like a bastard anymore. You carry yourself differently, like someone who's realized he might be more. Jon swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry. I don't know what you're talking about. Tyrion smirked and sipped his wine. Of course you don't. Then he stood and walked toward the door, but before he left, he turned. If you ever go south, boy, Be careful who you trust. In King's Landing, even your own shadow might stab you in the back. After Tyrion left, Jon sat alone, the candlelight flickering over ancient scrolls and torn pages. His mind wouldn't stop spinning. Tyrion was dangerous, not because he was cruel, but because he was clever. And clever men could connect pieces no one else saw. Jon made a decision that night. He would find out the truth of who he was. Not just Lyanna, not just Rhaegar. He wanted to understand why his birth was so dangerous, why his life had been hidden like a shameful secret, and most of all, he needed to know what role he was supposed to play in a world that had already decided who deserved power. The next morning, Jon visited the crypts again. This time, he wasn't just staring at statues. He was searching. Behind Lyanna's tomb, he pressed against the stone wall, wondering if the old rumors about hidden passages were true. Nothing moved, but he didn't give up. He came back every day for a week, searching by torchlight. Finally, behind a loose stone near the base of her statue, he found something.
The days after Jon read his mother's letter felt like walking through fog. Everyone still called him Jon Snow, still treated him like the quiet bastard boy in the corner. No one knew that the truth was now stitched into his skin like armor, and yet it didn't feel like protection. It felt like a fire burning inside him with nowhere to go. He wasn't just someone's mistake anymore. He was the son of the last Targaryen prince and a Stark maiden who died for love. He was the blood of kings and wolves. But no one could know. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He carried the letter tucked deep in his boot, always with him, like a secret blade. One morning, as snowflakes danced through the air, Jon found himself watching Bran climb the old tower walls again, as he always did. The boy had no fear, only curiosity. Maester Luwin had warned him not to do it, but Bran never listened. Jon stood at the base of the tower, calling out, "You're going to break your neck one day." Bran just grinned. "Then I'll fly." Jon laughed softly. "You're not a bird." "Maybe not," Bran said, gripping a stone. "But I see more from up here than anyone down there ever will." Those words stuck with Jon longer than he expected. That night, as he lay in bed, he couldn't sleep. Bran had no idea how right he was. Sometimes, only when you were above it all did you see how twisted the world really was. The next morning, chaos hit Winterfell like a storm. Bran had fallen. Jon heard the screams before he saw the people running. He reached the courtyard just as Robb came running from the opposite side, pale and shaking. They met eyes, and neither had to say a word. They raced up the tower stairs, two at a time. Maester Luwin and Catelyn were already in the room, standing over the bed where Bran lay unmoving, eyes closed, limbs still. Catelyn's face was white with horror. Her eyes were empty. She didn't even notice Jon standing there. "Will he wake?" Robb whispered. Luwin didn't answer right away. "The fall was high. We don't know yet. He's alive, but not awake." Jon wanted to step closer, to put a hand on Bran's arm, but then Catelyn turned to him. "You," she hissed, "you shouldn't be here. It's your fault. You distracted him. You always do. You always take things that don't belong to you." "Cat," Robb started. "No," she said sharply. "He doesn't belong here. He never did." Jon's heart sank. He turned without a word and walked out. Later that night, after the castle had quieted, Jon stood in the great hall, staring into the cold fireplace. The flames had gone out hours ago. He felt empty. Arya found him there. She sat beside him, cross-legged like a wild little wolf. "Everyone's acting like it's over," she said softly. "But Bran's strong. He's not done." Jon nodded. He's stronger than any of us." Arya tilted her head. "You're acting weird. You're not going to run off again, are you?" "No," he said, "not this time." She smiled. "Good, because I'd miss you, even if no one else would." Jon looked at her and realized that she, more than anyone, had never treated him like a mistake. The next day, something else changed. A fire had broken out in the library tower, small, quickly put out, but it wasn't an accident. Someone had set it. And later that evening, a direwolf, Bran's wolf, attacked a servant, ripped his throat out while he was carrying something through the halls. When they checked the body, they found a dagger. Not just any dagger, a Valyrian steel blade with a dragon bone hilt. Jon stared at the weapon, heart pounding. He wasn't a fool. Someone had tried to kill Bran. And if they had failed, they would try again. That night, Jon returned to the Godswood, netter in hand, his mind racing. Whoever tried to silence Bran was scared of what he might have seen. And if someone was willing to send an assassin to Winterfell, this was no random act. It was politics. It was power. He thought about King's Landing, about Cersei, about the way Jaime Lannister had looked at him. There were things happening beneath the surface, deadly things. Jon knew what he had to do. He couldn't just sit and hide in Winterfell anymore. If people were willing to kill a boy in his sleep, then one day they'd come for him too. And if his true name ever slipped from someone's lips, they'd come faster than ravens could fly. He needed to learn how to fight, not just with a sword, but with knowledge, with strategy, with truth. He needed to become more than Jon Snow. He needed to become Aegon Targaryen, quietly, carefully, and when the time was right, completely.
The snow fell harder the night Jon left Winterfell. He didn't say goodbye, not to Robb, not to Arya, not to anyone. If they knew, they would try to stop him, and he couldn't afford delay. Every hour mattered now. With his uncle locked in a dungeon and whispers of war spreading like wildfire, Jon had to move before the realm tore itself apart. He dressed in plain black clothes, hid Lyanna's letter deep inside his tunic, and took one of the quieter horses from the stables. No banners, no honor guard, just a bastard boy riding into the unknown, carrying the blood of kings in silence. The first few days were cold and brutal. The North didn't forgive travelers, especially alone and unprotected. But Jon had been raised in snow and stone. He knew how to make a fire, how to hide tracks, how to move without being seen. As he passed through smaller villages, he heard bits of news, whispers of the hand of the king being called a traitor, of Queen Cersei seizing power after King Robert's accident during a hunt, of Prince Joffrey sitting the throne now, young and dangerous. And then came the worst rumor, that Lord Eddard Stark was going to be executed. Jon nearly fell off his horse when he heard it. A man in a tavern said it like it was common gossip, the northern traitor caught trying to steal the throne. Jon clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. The wine in his mouth went sour. He left that night without resting, heart full of fire. By the time he reached the edges of the Riverlands, Jon looked nothing like a lord's son. Dirt covered his cloak, and his face was tired and hollow. But his eyes, they had sharpened. He didn't look like a boy anymore. In a quiet town near the crossroads, he met someone unexpected. A man named Yoren, a recruiter for the Night's Watch, passing through on his way back to the Wall. He remembered Jon from Winterfell, remembered the boy who almost joined. He didn't ask many questions, but his eyes were sharp. "You runnin' from something?" Yoren asked one night over a fire. Jon stared into the flames.
I'm running toward something." Yoren smirked. "That's worse." Jon nodded slightly. "Do you know King's Landing well?" "Well enough to hate it." "I need to get there, quietly." Yoren didn't answer right away. He chewed his meat slowly, then said, "You got a name that means trouble?" Jon hesitated. "Snow." Yoren grunted. "Well, Snow, if you ride with me and keep your mouth shut, I'll get you close, but once we're in, you're on your own." "Fair enough," Jon said. They reached the capital a week later. The walls of King's Landing rose like jagged teeth, smoke curling from the city beyond. The smell hit Jon first. Sweat, piss, rot. It wasn't like the clean cold of the north. This place stank of too many people and too many secrets. Yoren gave him a final nod at the gates. "Don't get killed, Snow." Jon disappeared into the crowd. He had no map, no allies, only his instincts and the name burning inside his chest. Aegon. The Red Keep loomed above everything, a fortress made of blood and ambition. Jon knew he couldn't just walk in, but he didn't come to storm it. He came to watch. He moved like a ghost through the city. He listened at taverns, followed guards, mapped out the castle from afar. And one night, while hiding behind a vendor's cart, he heard something that made his blood run cold. Two goldcloaks whispering. "They're executing Lord Stark tomorrow, outside the Sept. Queen's orders. Little shit of a king signed it with a grin." Jon couldn't breathe. Tomorrow? Everything in him screamed to rush the gates, to fight, to stop it. But he wasn't a knight. He wasn't even a soldier. He was one boy with a sword and a secret. So he waited. The next day, the city gathered near the Sept of Baelor. Thousands packed the square. Jon pushed his way through the crowd, his hood low, his eyes fixed on the steps. And then he saw him. Eddard Stark, in chains, beard grown out, face tired but proud. The crowd was shouting. Some cursed him, some stayed silent. Queen Joffrey sat above, smug and gleaming in gold. Beside him, Cersei watched like a snake ready to strike. Ned looked out at the people, and then at someone hidden in the crowd. For just a second, Jon was sure their eyes met. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. But Jon knew. He knew Ned had seen him. Then the boy king stood and gave the command that would change the realm forever. He said, "Bring me his head." Time slowed. Jon couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't barely breathe. He heard Joffrey's words, "Bring me his head," and the crowd around him roared, some in shock, others in excitement, like it was a show. But Jon felt the world collapse around him. Ned Stark, the man who raised him, the man who lied to protect him, the only father he had ever known, was about to die. He pushed forward, shoving through bodies, his hood falling back, his eyes locked on the Sept steps. And then the guards grabbed Ned, forced him down. The sword was coming, a long, gleaming blade Jon had seen before. Sir Ilyn Payne stepped forward, silent, face cold as the steel in his hands. Jon reached for his own blade, too far, too slow, too late. And then, chaos. A scream, not from the crowd, but from behind the steps. Suddenly, a cloaked figure leapt from the side of the Sept, knocking into the executioner. Guards turned, confused. People scattered. The executioner stumbled. Jon didn't understand what was happening, but he didn't hesitate. He ran. In the confusion, with guards distracted and the royal family unsure what was happening, Jon bolted through the crowd, cutting left, then right, slipping between stunned townsfolk. He didn't go for Ned directly. He couldn't, not with so many Lannister swords. Instead, he moved behind the side of the Sept, where the cloaked figure had emerged. There, waiting in the shadows, was Arya. Her face was pale, her breathing wild, but in her hand was needle, the blade Jon had given her. "You," he started. "Come on," she yelled, grabbing his arm. They ran together through a passage behind the sept, a narrow, half-collapsed stone hallway Arya had found during her weeks in the city. She had never trusted the Lannisters, not even Sansa's prince. She'd been hiding, watching, waiting for this. Behind them, bells rang out, not for a king, not for a wedding, for an execution. But the sword didn't fall. Because when Jon and Arya reached the end of the alley, panting and shaking, they heard something that stopped them cold. A voice, a familiar one, guttural and deep. "Drop the blade." It was Sandor Clegane, the Hound. Jon and Arya looked back just in time to see the Hound step between Sir Ilyn Payne and Ned Stark. His sword was drawn, and his eyes were locked on Joffrey. "No man kills a Stark while I still draw breath." Cersei stood furious. "You defy your king?" "I defy a spoiled child playing king." Swords were drawn, guards rushed forward, the crowd scattered in panic, and in the middle of it all, Ned Stark vanished. Not by magic, not by sword, but by Varys, the spy, who had been waiting in the shadows with his little birds. By the time the city settled, the sept was stained in blood, but not Ned's. He was gone, and so were Jon and Arya. That night, deep beneath King's Landing, in the tunnels only the rats and spies knew, Jon stood face to face with Ned Stark again. "You were supposed to stay in Winterfell," Ned said, voice rough but steady. "You were supposed to stay alive," Jon answered. For a long moment they just stared at each other, two men, one old, one young, tied by blood and lies and duty. Then Jon pulled the letter from his cloak. "I know," he said softly. Ned's eyes darkened. "How?" "I found it, in the crypts. Mother's letter." Ned closed his eyes. "Then you know why I kept it hidden?" Jon nodded. "Because the world isn't ready for Aegon Targaryen." Arya looked between them confused. "What are you talking about?" Jon turned to her. "I'm not your brother, Arya. Not by blood." She stared, stunned. But Jon smiled softly. "But I'll always be your brother. You're my family, more than any name." Ned stepped forward. "We have little time. The capital will search for us soon. I have friends in the free cities. We can disappear. Or you can rise." Jon looked at him. "Rise as what? A Targaryen? A king?"